Here we are at the Crush the Career Fair Hiring Partner Pop-Up Webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Martin, and I'm going to be leading you through tonight's presentation. Again, I appreciate your patience as we've had a couple of technical difficulties with the call so far, but no worries, we're gonna get you rocking and rolling and ready for the upcoming pop-up. If you have questions, please leave them in the comment section of the YouTube video. We have Kirsten there, and she's going to be answering any questions that pop up throughout the presentation, as well as collecting questions so that we can add them to the Q&A at the end of our call. So no matter how big or small your question, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will hopefully be able to address them all before we wrap. All right, let's get into it. Hiring Partner Pop-Up. It's coming up soon, Tuesday, September 26th to be exact, and it's going to run from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time. Now that little asterisk there is important. You're going to want to arrive about 15 minutes prior to the event. This is important because whenever you're trying to get to one of these events, you want to be there with enough time to check out the room, take a walk around, see how things look, and see where everyone's at, as well as review your notes, maybe practice your elevator pitch a couple of times, and then even like relax a bit, breathe a bit before you go in and start chatting people up and learning about all the great opportunities that are happening. All right, where do you need to go to come to our event? It's going to be at the Los Altos History Museum at 51 South San Antonio Road. And as you can see, we got a nice little map here for you, but make sure that you prep and know how you're going to get there, know what route you're going to take so that you can arrive 15 minutes early, whether it's driving yourself, taking a Lyft, taking an Uber, or riding your bike. Make sure you plan ahead, know how to get there, and leave plenty of time. All right, so who is going to be at this event? Well, it's going to be y'all. It's going to be every one of you, 250 plus. Students RSVP'd across 3 different nanodegrees. Now what this means is that there's going to be a lot of really interesting conversations happening at the event, from self-driving car engineering to artificial intelligence to machine learning, and different companies are going to have different needs. So as you get there, know that there will likely be lines to talk with these different folks, and know that each booth is going to have different things that they're looking to chat about. So this is really important in order to be able to do your research ahead of time. And that brings us into your event preparation, not only offline, but online as well. Before the event, you're going to want to go through all of your online profiles and compare them with the job opportunities that are going to be available at the event. See if there's anything that you can add or highlight within your LinkedIn or GitHub or personal portfolio, whatever it may be. See if there are things that you can update, highlight, move to the top of the page so that when the recruiters take your information and look you up after the event, all your best stuff is showing. You also want to update and print out lots and lots of copies of your resume. This is extremely important because that's going to be the main takeaway that you leave with each one of the recruiters so that they can find you and follow up with you after the event. And with that as well, you want to make sure that you update it so that all the most relevant information for the opportunities at the event are highlighted. You'll also want to research the companies and prep questions. Now we're going to get into this pretty deep in this presentation, but I just want to note that doing your research prior to the event and also knowing what things you're curious about and would love to learn more of is really important so that you can have great conversations when you get to the booths. And then finally, in the pre-event prep, you're going to want to get your clothes and your route ready. I already mentioned the route, but it's really important to figure out what you're going to wear prior to the event and lay it out the night before. You'd hate to get into a situation where your favorite shirt, your favorite interview shirt, has a big stain on it 15 minutes prior to running out the door and you're scrambling. So get everything ready the day before. Take a look at the weather, make sure that you're dressed to impress, and be good to go. Once you get to the event, you're going to want to have a pen and a notebook handy. Now, At the event, you will likely get pens and notebooks from different companies as you're chatting with them. It's a standard fare to have little giveaways at each one of the booths. But just think about how strange it would be holding an Uber notebook while talking to Lyft. Yeah, it's a little strange. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you have your own notebook that is, blank, no branding, and your own pen ready to be able to write down. It seems like a small thing, but it can actually be something that is really good to know for an event like this. And also think about the size of your notebook as well. In the picture here, we have someone with a full-size notebook, but if you're trying to juggle a notebook and pens and your backpack and shaking hands, it can all start to get quite cumbersome. So some people like to opt for a pocket notebook or something of that sort. So think about how you like to hold and write and keep your hands free when walking around interacting with people and talking. Now this brings me to carrying a small bag and no bulky backpacks. Now this is really important because I'm actually someone who I carry a big bulky backpack. And anytime I'm on the train, I tend to be hitting people with that backpack and it gets pretty annoying for them. Now this is fine when you're commuting, but when you're at an event like this, you want to travel light. You don't want to be hitting people with your backpack in the crowded alleys between the company booths. And it would be really not so good if you accidentally knocked the coffee out of one of the recruiter's hands while you were just turning to grab a water yourself, and now you got a big mess. So think about what type of things you're carrying and how carrying those things will feel when you're in a room of 250 plus people trying to have conversations and interact. Now that brings us to pocketing some business cards if you have them. Now business cards aren't a requirement, not everyone has them, but if you do, it's a great little additional leave behind that you can give to companies while you're chatting with them. But what you have to have are those resumes. So we're hitting that twice on this slide. Make sure that you have lots of copies of your resume and bring them in a hard folder ready to hand out. And I say hard folder because a lot of times people will toss them into a notebook or even just leave them like loose in their bag. And then when they pull it out to give it to a company, it's all crinkled, the corners are all messed up. And this is just not putting your best foot forward. Let the recruiter bang up the resume when they put it in their big folder with everything else. But when you arrive, it should be nice and crisp and ready to go. So be sure to keep a hard folder, whether it's a leather Padfolio or whether it's just a nice 5-star heavy stock folder. Make sure that you're protecting these resumes so that you put your best foot forward. And this brings us to the dress code. Well, there isn't really a dress code at the event. However, casual has a lot of different definitions. And so we want to be a little bit clearer of what the best way to dress casually would be for an event like this. And it tends to come down to this idea, this new buzzword term of smart casual. So what is smart casual? Well, it's kind of like business casual, but a little bit more laid back. You can wear jeans, you can wear slacks, etc. And so we'll just kind of say it's informal, but it's professional. And so that includes either a button down or a dressy top. It could include nice jeans or slacks. It could even include a blazer or a vest. However, know that this is an outdoor event and we don't want you to overheat. So wear light colors and be able to remove layers if you do choose to wear a number of layers. And a key thing to wearing a number of layers is knowing what you would do if you took a layer off. If you're wearing a heavy blazer and you take it off, you're not gonna want to just toss it on the floor. So maybe you'll want to lean it somewhere in the vicinity, but just know leaving it on chairs could get a little dicey. So whatever you do wear, whatever you do bring, be aware of what the weather is going to be that day. Be aware of any fluctuations that might happen, and be able to put your layers into a bag or seek out a spot once you get to the event to put it down if you do end up taking it off. All right, now here's the big slide, the one you've all been waiting for. Who are the companies that are going to be at the event? Well, these are the brands that you have got to get to know. We've got some really big hitters here, and each one is looking for different things. So go through the emails that we've sent you, look through the resources that you have, and really mine the internet to find out what it is these companies are looking for, what skills you bring to the table, and who you want to talk to. So do you want to talk to the Amazons? Do you want to talk to the Lyfts? Do you want to talk to the Googles? This is where your research really starts to come into play. But drink this slide in, because these are the folks that you're going to be interacting with once you get to the event. Now that you know who the companies are, it's time to do some research. So where do we go to do research on companies? Well, the standard answer is to their website or to LinkedIn, and these are great places to start. You can look through all of their branding materials. You can even look through some of their pitch decks, depending on what type of company they are. But you can also look on YouTube. You can also read blogs and podcasts, and not even the YouTube channels of the actual brand. You can start looking at blogs of employees. You can look at podcasts that the company puts out in their marketing materials. And these are really great places to look for information on the companies, because not only will you get the chance to get an idea of the industry, but you'll also get a chance to get an idea of the types of questions the company is asking, right? What are the types of questions that Amazon is asking about the future? Maybe they're thinking about grocery with the recent acquisition of Whole Foods. Who knows? This is where these different resources come into play. And you might even find some interesting podcasts that are talking about recent developments in the company. And these are all great things that can lay the seeds for good questions you can ask when you have that one-on-one time at the booth, or just expanding your industry knowledge and having a better understanding of what the company does and what their goals are. And that brings me to informational interviews. Now, the event is coming up quick, so if you're going to be doing this, you better get on it. But there's this amazing tool called findthat.email, which allows you to search people's email addresses by name and company URL. Now, you want to use this carefully, because you don't want to be spammy and you don't want to bother people too much before you meet them in person. However, if there are folks that you find who work at the company, who have the job title that you're looking to apply for, and you want to just get some insider knowledge about what does that role mean, what do they actually work on every day, what skills are they using, you can set up a 15-minute informational interview by emailing them and saying, hey, I have this great event coming up. I'm really excited for it. I saw that you do X, Y, and Z at this company. Do you have 15 minutes to chat on the phone? I would love to learn about your experience. Now, be careful with this. Don't be spammy, but it's a great resource if you want to do some real hands-on investigation. And then what are the things that you want to look for? Well, we've already touched on a number of things, but it really kind of comes down to their mission, their values, trying to find out about the company's size and their future growth. What products are they working on? What industries are they trying to tackle? What technologies are they trying to incorporate? And what is their culture and work-life balance? That's a great question to ask during the informational interviews. You can really get a sense of how that person approaches their work and life and what they're excited about, and start to get that, those details that are just seeds for you to bring into the conversation. Say, I talked to someone, I learned these things, I'd love to learn your perspective on it as well. And that's how you get into these amazing conversations. Next up, what are the opportunities that they're gonna have? What are the jobs? Well, there's a number of job titles that they're gonna be looking for at this event. Like I said, we have 3 different groups, and so there's lots of different topics that we can dive into with these companies when we're chatting with them. But here's just a few of the things that we know they're looking for. Bosch and BMW are looking for data engineers. Continental is looking for a sensor fusion engineer. DD Labs, Google, Lyft, and NVIDIA are looking for software engineers. Uber and Voyage are looking for machine learning specialists. Volkswagen is looking for a big data engineer. Now, they're looking for much more than this, but these are some really great starting points for your research and to figure out who you want to talk to and what you want to talk to them about. And really, this comes down to doing your research. Look up these positions online. See if you can find them on LinkedIn, on Indeed, or on the company websites. Read through what they are asking for. What skills do they need? Highlight those things in your profiles and in your talking points as well. So really getting into the nitty-gritty here and finding things that are both related as well as interesting and pique your curiosity. Because once you get to that event, you don't want to have all of your questions answered, but you do want to know what questions you're going to ask, or at least you want to get a new perspective on the questions that you've already tried to answer yourself. Now that comes to the actual event. What's it going to be like once you walk into that room? Well, as we mentioned, we're going to have over 200 students, actually over 250, wandering around, practicing their pitches, looking at the companies, walking up and chatting with everyone. You've got a lot of folks in that room trying to have really great conversations. And then you've got 14 company booths waiting to meet you and chat with you and learn all about the amazing things you're working on and the things that you're curious about and what you want and what value you want to bring to that company. So you can approach these hiring representatives at the booths. You can give them your pitch. You can start conversations. This is what it's going to basically look like once you get there. Career fairs are a great place to not only meet the companies, but also chat with other people who are looking to do similar things to you. You might even be able to help each other out with your job search after the event. Maybe you meet someone there who's looking for the same opportunities, or maybe looking for different opportunities, but you can keep each other accountable moving forward. Take advantage of the fact that you've got this amazing room of people who are looking to hire and who are looking for jobs and who are all in a similar mindset as you. And then there's going to be interviews at the event for select students who will be taken aside. This will be pre-scheduled, so you'll get a notice prior to the event of whether or not you'll be part of these interviews. All right, now we're going to get into the real meat of the presentation, how to make a great impression. Now, this is the elevator pitch. This is a big deal, right? We're told that we've got to come up with this amazing 30-second pitch that impresses the world and makes everyone want to be on our side. Well, I mean, that'd be awesome if you could get it together. But also know that the elevator pitch is more than just the introduction. It's the conversation you have with the person when you meet them. So how can we prepare for the pitch in the best way possible? Well, you could stress out about trying to get it down to 30 seconds, or you could get ready to have many different types of conversations depending on where it goes once you start it. So here's how you prepare for that second option of being able to have either a short pitch or a long conversation, depending on how it goes. Well, the first thing you have to do is know that confidence comes from practice. So whether you're trying to engage someone and talk about their company, or whether you're just trying to, get your pitch down to 30 seconds, the only way you can do that is by practicing and practicing and practicing. But how do you do that when you're by yourself? Well, you can actually write out your talking points and run through the things that you want to say. So you can say, well, I researched this article last week, and I'm really curious how that's going to actually impact the business overall. Or I researched this new technology, and I'm curious to know if they're using it in any meaningful way. These are the types of things that you can actually practice asking with friends, or if you want to just pull up the voice memo on your phone, you can really start to say the things that you're thinking out loud and then listen back to yourself and improve upon those questions and improve upon those stories. So one really great thing is to look up the types of questions that companies ask at career fairs or at interviews, because they tend to be fairly similar. They'll ask you what your skills are, they'll ask you what you're interested in, they'll ask you why you think this company is interesting, and so on. Well, if we wait until the last minute, we'll feel very put on the spot and we won't really know what to say. There's going to be a lot of noise going on in the room. There's going to be a lot of other things that are catching our attention. So prior to the event, take some time, record yourself answering those questions. You can look up a list of questions online and just record yourself answering them. When you listen back to that recording, you will just naturally start to see areas where you can improve and where you can consolidate and where you can make the story easier to understand with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and really just improve overall. So I highly, highly recommend that. The next thing you want to do is keep your intro short and make the rest of the interaction a conversation. So a lot of times someone will walk up and they'll just start talking and they'll just keep talking, right? And so all of a sudden, you've got an intro that should have just been, hi, I'm someone who's studying this topic and I'm really interested in your company, and then putting a question back to them to say, what is it about the company that you find most exciting? Instead of doing that, we launch into 5 to 7 minutes of, here's all the projects that I worked on. And that's a surefire way to get someone to tune out, because it's just really hard to follow. So keep your intro short and make it a conversation. And if you want to really step up your game, you have time to meet with a career counselor and set up 30 minutes before the 26th so that you can really get into the nitty-gritty of all of these things, practice it with someone, have them ask you questions, see how you answer them, and then go back home, practice them on your own, and record yourself and listen back to it. And if you actually get to the point where you've answered them in a really great way and you have the recording, you can listen to that recording on your way to the event and refresh your memory. It's a really great tool to have. Basically, how these conversations break down is you introduce yourself, you ask a question, you wait for their response, and then you continue the conversation. It's a very simple equation. I know it takes a little bit of practice, but if you spend the time up front getting all of your ideas together, you'll be poised for success. All right, part 2 of the elevator pitch and making a great impression. All right, well, what are you actually going to say during this conversation? That's really important to know, isn't it? Well, the first thing you want to do is clearly state what type of a role you're looking for. Then you want to explain why you're interested in the field. You want to tell them why you took this nano degree, and you want to elaborate on your experience in the space. You'll also want to articulate your strongest, most likely most recent project, and touch on any industry terms, programming languages, etc. Python, C++, Java, and so on. And you'll also want to share some of your soft skills that are relevant to your job. Now, I say all those things and I put them in a list, but this is not a linear list necessarily. This is a list of things that can be brought up throughout the conversation. So let's say you begin by clearly stating what type of a role you're looking for, and then you pose it to them saying, what have you found to be the best skills for someone who's working in those roles at your company? Well, then the recruiter responds to you with their answer, and you can say, well, that's wonderful. It's so great to hear that they're using C++. I actually have had a lot of experience using C++ in these projects. So you've jumped from the first bullet down to the 6th bullet and then back up to the 5th, right? And so this is how the conversation happens. As long as you're ready to talk about all of these things, you'll be able to more fluidly jump around the conversation. And then sneaking in some of your soft skills is really important too. Things like collaboration, communication, attention to detail. And to know what soft skills are most relevant to you and your personality, I highly recommend checking out 16personalities.com and taking their free personality test. It's a fun little tool that gives you extremely easy to understand descriptions of your strengths. So if you finish the test and then you go into the strengths and weaknesses section, you can just read through, oh, here's a few strengths that are very well communicated in very easy to understand English. Because if you actually go to some of the job board sites, they'll give you a lot of jargon. This is really fun because it's much easier to interact and say, well, here's the strengths that I have and here's what I'm able to bring to a team. All right, part 3, and I'm gonna really double down on this piece because asking good questions is so important. And the reason for this is because if you've ever been in a conversation that wasn't having a very good back and forth, let's say you go on a date and you answer a question with a one-word answer, right? So where are you from? Chicago. And you just have that silence. That's the awkward silence that we all want to avoid. So if you finish your introductions or your answers by opening up the conversation to another question, it's one of the best ways to get a good rapport going and to avoid those awkward silences. So if someone were to say, where are you from? And I say Chicago, I can say, where are you from? What's your favorite team? What's it like living there? So on and so forth. These questions keep the conversation moving forward. Well, what types of questions should you be asking? Well, the best questions ever are open-ended questions. And in parentheses there, no, yes, no. No, yes, no questions. If you ask a yes, no question, you'll get a yes or a no answer, and then you have to reinvent the conversation every single time. So don't ask those questions. Instead, ask questions about what you're actually curious about, and be curious about the person you're talking to. They are a really important person who makes decisions for that company. That's why they're at this event. So learn about why they work for that company. Learn about what they like about that company. Learn about what they've learned doing events like this in the past. Learn about all the different things that you have questions about that you're just not able to find online on your own. Be interested in them, find out what they're excited about, and then engage in that excitement. Here's a few examples. What about the company are you most excited about? I'm going to replace they with you because this was written for you, but now we're talking to them. Where do you see things in the industry moving in the future? What technologies do you feel are the most impactful for the company's future? And what parts of the business are growing the fastest and why? These are questions that open up more conversations. If you ask about technologies and they say a handful of things that you know, you get to chime in and say, oh, I've had experience with that. Here's what I've learned. Have you seen that work in your experience? And you get a nice rapport going. All right, and finally, part 4 of the elevator pitch, body language. This is a really big one. We see Amy Cuddy off on the right-hand side here, who gave an amazing TED Talk about power poses. Take a look at this picture, at the 3 folks on the projector behind her, and then take a look at her. Who seems like they have more power? Well, clearly her. I mean, that's what the whole TED Talk was about. But the idea there being is that slouching and looking at your phone and staring at the floor and not making eye contact are positions that discourage conversation. They don't make you look very open and don't make you look very approachable. And what you want to be at this event is approachable. So think about it. When you get there, try and stand up straight. Try and open yourself up. What she's doing is the starfish pose or the star pose. I'm not sure quite what it's called, where you just open up your whole body and you put your hands up and it just kind of shakes out the cobwebs so that you can go in with your head held high and have a great conversation. Now, I've seen people do the Superman pose before presentations. I've seen all sorts of different things, and it really does work. And one of the things that you can do with it is maybe in between each conversation you have, step off to the side, take notes on your conversation, and then do another big pose, maybe in the hallway off to the side, maybe not in the middle of the room, but just, maybe do a Superman pose with your hands on your hips, kind of like Superman is, and that will just kind of reshake out any like staring at the floor, crouched over look that you might have. Also, when it comes to body language, when you meet someone at the beginning of a conversation and at the end of a conversation, shake their hands. If you have sweaty hands, feel free to wipe them on your pants before you shake their hand. No worries. But it's not their first time at a hiring fair either. So we're all ready to just shake everyone's hand, be really friendly, and get those conversations started. When you're shaking hands, make sure that you're smiling, make sure you're saying hello, make sure you're saying goodbye, and stand straight. Again, lean into the conversation. It may get a little loud with 250 people chatting. And finally, speak clearly and be heard. Like I said, it could get a bit loud. Also, you really want to take care of the takeaways while you're there. You want to make sure before you leave that conversation that you get the recruiter's information and you are sure to follow up within 24 hours. So be thankful, even maybe suggest a time. Hey, I'm looking forward to following up with you and setting up a time to continue the conversation. All right, now here's what you have to watch out for. If you've ever been to a career fair, you know that they are infamous for swag. Swag are little tchotchkes that have the company's name on it. And they could be anything from a stress ball to a Frisbee to anything. And so when you're there, watch out, because these items can start to bulk up. you might get a little backpack from someone or a notebook, and all of a sudden you go to shake someone's hand and you just drop a handful of little knickknacks. So these little items can get in the way. If you must take them, try to put them in your bag, or in between your conversations with the booths, go off to the side, put it down on a table, and then come back to it. Don't try and shake hands with your hands full. If you have water in one hand and a tchotchke in the other and your resume binder in your third arm, if you even have one, you're gonna start to get a little overwhelmed. So keep it simple. Just put the stuff down, come back, and like I said earlier, you don't want to be holding an Uber notebook when talking to Lyft. So, this is a little game you got to play, but just either don't take them or take them and put them to the side and grab them at the end of the event. And then when you're standing in line, this can be a time where you feel very stressed out because you're waiting, there's people moving around you, people are bumping into you, you're trying to figure out what you're going to say. Really just take the time while you're waiting in line to breathe and pay attention to your surroundings. Think about the questions you want to ask, practice your pitch in your head, and then listen to the conversations happening. That's actually a really fun thing to do because you might overhear the booth next to you or the person in front of you talking about something really interesting. And then you can build on that in your conversation. You might learn something about the industry you didn't know and continue to build on it. So these are all things that you can do while you're waiting in line. And then just remember to breathe and remember to take care of yourself. And that brings us to keep calm and be a buddy. You really do want to take care of yourself at this event, and you want to take breaks when you can. So if you know people that'll be at this event, that's wonderful. If not, see if you can meet someone on your way in. So encourage each other and share strategies. Also, take breaks. Get water when you need it. Find a table to review your notes between conversations and jot down notes from each conversation. Practice your questions in the hallways with friends when you get a chance, and it'll all be good. Also, don't let it end at the fair. This is the big piece, the next steps. You need to make sure that you're exchanging information, which means you're leaving your resume and you're getting their information, their name, and their business card. You want to follow up with an email within 24 hours, and you want to express your interest in continuing the conversation. Now, when you send that email, try and remember something from the conversation. And a good way to do this is when you take their business card, write down a small note of something that you talked about in the conversation. And that's the note that you can follow up on. You can follow up by saying, here's a project I worked on, here's an article I read, here's something interesting about the industry. Would you mind, or I hope you enjoy this. And then you can check in periodically and ask to continue the conversation. So when you send that thank you note, say, hey, I'm so excited. It was great to meet you. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. Do you have time in the next week, maybe next Wednesday at a certain time, to jump on a call for 15 minutes and catch back up? These are great ways to just keep putting yourself out there and keep having a great conversation with these companies and building a long-term minded relationship. It's not a transaction, it's a long-term relationship. All right, and with that, we are in the Q&A part of the program here. And so I'm going to start pulling up some of the Slack messages from the chat and answering them for you here. Give me a second as I look through the chat. All right, our first question says, can we access this presentation offline? Absolutely. I'm going to be sharing these slides as well as the recorded version of this call with everybody. So keep an eye out for the follow-up emails, and they'll be coming your way soon. So the second question is, I am looking for product marketing, management, and business development roles. Do you think I may get relevant positions information? Well, many of the recruiters are representing technical groups, and but with that said, you can certainly ask. There's a lot of great things that you can talk about while you're at this fair. When you go up to the booths and you start talking to them, this is where that conversation part comes into play so crucially. Because what you can say is, hey, here's what I'm here for, but marketing needs to know about the technical side of the business. So I'm really curious what you think would be really interesting that the marketing team should know from a technical perspective. And you can start getting that multiple perspectives piece, and then you can still keep in touch and say, do you know anyone else at the company, maybe on the marketing team, that would be great to chat with? And so that's how you kind of turn this technical conversation into more of a, I want to get to know the company and everyone at the company. And this is something that's called account-based sales. And what that means is you try and become almost a household name at the company because you know so many people there. And so you don't really discriminate so much about who you're talking to. It's just getting to know lots and lots of people, so you have more and more ways in the door when you need it. So we have another question that says, how do we compete with people with master's degrees from universities? How best to make up for that deficiency? Also, do not have a CS undergraduate degree. Well, so this is a great question, and I have lots of conversations with folks about this on both sides of the coin. It's funny because everyone seems to think that the grass is always greener on the other side. The truth of the matter is, if you have a PhD, you feel like you can't get in because there's all these younger folks who will take the positions at a lower price. And then if you're one of the more entry-level folks, you think you can't get in because someone who has a PhD will take the job over you. But the truth of the matter is, they're not, while you might be competing in certain aspects, there is room for both of you in the industry. And so it's more of a worry of the grass is always greener on the other side than it is truly an issue. So what you should focus on are the things that you can control. And what can you control? Well, the things you can control are the amount of research you do with the company, the number of people that you reach out to that work there, having those great relationships and conversations, making sure that your online projects and your portfolio are relevant to their industry and interesting for the folks that work there. So let's say you want to work in the travel industry. Well, maybe the next thing that you work on or build or write about and present on your LinkedIn or your personal site, maybe that has to do with travel. And so these are all things that you can keep in mind so that as you are having these conversations, you're focusing less on that piece and more on what you're capable of doing and what you're interested in doing and how your interests and the company's interests align. Because what you really want to do at the end of the day is be able to take things off of their plate so that they can go work on new things. So will you be able to introduce yourself to every company, or will there be limits due to the waits and in the lines? Well, it depends. It depends on how much time you take between each booth, and it depends on sort of where you're at in the conversations. So this actually reminds me, there was a slide that was missed that I would like to touch on here. How to prioritize your interactions. There are two types of companies that you're going to want to chat with at this event. The first one are your practice companies, and the second ones are your dream companies. And this is going to be something that's really important because the way that you prioritize these interactions is going to be the way that you walk through the room. So there's going to be companies there that don't have anything that you're looking for. And those can be your practice companies. You still want to meet them because you're interested in what they do or because you want to practice your pitch or so on. But if they don't have an opportunity listed for what you do, that's where you get to practice. How do I learn about the culture? How do I learn about what the organization does? How do I learn about what this person is excited about? And again, you shake off those cobwebs so that you can go talk with, so that when you do get to your dream company booth, that is the one that you really want to nail your conversation and your pitch with. And so when you think about, will I be able to introduce myself to every company? The real question is, which companies do I absolutely have to talk to before I leave? And those are your dream companies. So make sure when you go to that list of all the companies that'll be at the event, know which ones are your must-haves and which ones are your like-to-haves and which ones are your practice. And by prioritizing things in that way, you can really set it up for maximum efficiency and make sure that you've started with a couple of practice, spent the middle part of the event getting to all the ones that you really, really want to get to, and then finish the event with some more of the ones that are good, but maybe not your dream companies. Will hiring managers be present at the event? I actually don't know the answer to this one. I believe some companies will be sending hiring managers, but for the most part, typical career fairs and hiring events tend to send representatives from different departments or different teams that have a bit of an insight into that team, or they send HR folks who have an insight into the company. It really depends. So I think that that's something that when you get to each table, ask them, what is it that they do at the company? What are the things that they're working on? What are they excited about? And that's, again, how you get into these great conversations. Because even if it's not the hiring manager, it's still someone who's important to get to know. And these are really important things. Oh, and I just got a notification. Yes, they will be. So the hiring managers will be present. So put on your game face and be ready to go. Any advice for people coming from different backgrounds, such as fintech or aerospace? How can we make our current experience relevant? I'm worried I don't have enough programming experience. This is a really great question. And certain things that you want to keep in mind are basically, when it comes to your background, it's all related. So if you think about it, what was it that drew you into fintech in the first place? What is it that drew you into aerospace in the first place? There is likely a common interest that is bringing you along this path from that background into programming. And knowing what those connecting dots are, and this is why you should set up a call with some of our career counselors to talk through your story, knowing what those related ideas are, even going all the way back to high school. Your interests have changed and evolved over time, but they usually change and evolve within a certain line of thought. So try and go back and think, well, what were my interests then? What are my interests now? And how have they changed and evolved and pivoted? But they usually pivot around a center. So really ask yourself, what was it about fintech that I enjoyed? What was it about aerospace that I enjoyed? And what is it about programming that I enjoy so much? And then try and find the related ideas between them. All right, I'm looking through a few more questions here. If you have more questions, feel free to add them into the chat. Will they be hiring internships at the event? Not immediately at the event. They're going to be hiring for those positions that are listed in the email that we sent out, as well as their website and so on. But if you see things online, if you do see internships online, you can always ask about them. Or if you are chatting with them and you can ask, what is it like for different types of entry points into the company? You can see if there's maybe a rotational program at some companies. They take you through different areas of the business. So there's lots of different things to ask questions about. And these are all great questions to either research prior to the event or ask during the event, or even better, if you set up some of those informational interviews with folks who work at the company, you can ask them those questions as well. They are looking for people who would be interesting candidates to follow up with mainly. Just to kind of put a cap on this one, they're trying to find people that fit within the company. So that's why it's so important to not only do research on the company's mission and what they stand for and what they're interested in, but also take a look at your mission and what you stand for and what you're interested in. So a good way to do this is to take a look at some of your hobbies. What would you do if you weren't at work right now? Now, a lot of people are like, well, I'm searching for a job, so that's everything that I do. But think back, some people like cooking, some people like travel, some people like X, Y, and Z. And so you can start thinking about, all right, well, maybe the travel industry is really fascinating, and that's why Lyft and Uber are so interesting, because they are trying to change not only the automotive industry, but all sorts of different industries related to travel, right? And so now you get to start having an interesting conversation of, well, I'm interested in fintech or something like that. How does that relate to these industries of the companies that are here? What advice is there for recent college grads? Well, the nice thing about college is it breeds curiosity. And so if you're fresh out of college, the one thing you should have in just an exponential amount of is curiosity and questions to ask and things you don't know. And not knowing something is wonderful because it gives you things to talk about and learn. And I think that's really important, because one of the things that we tend to be so scared about is that I don't know all the answers. You're not supposed to know all the answers. That's the whole point. No one at any company knows all of the answers. If they did, they wouldn't be needing to hire people. They're hiring us because we ask the right questions, not because we have all the answers. So if you are a recent college grad, own that and say, I recently graduated from college and I am just filled with questions about this industry. I could talk to you for 6 hours, but I'm going to keep it to these 5 questions. And then you ask those 5 questions and say, you know how I said I have like a million other questions? Would you mind continuing the conversation with me next week? I'll send you a follow-up with some times. I'm really excited to learn more. Boom, you've got a great conversation going. You've got a connection at a company. You've got someone you can reach out to and keep in touch with. We have another question that says, will there be more career fairs like this organized by Udacity for the nanodegree students? And the answer is a great big yes. This is the second partner event that we've held this year, and we are looking to do more in the future. I'm just checking some of the questions that are coming in. Please be patient. And yes, all right, here's one. We mentioned earlier in the presentation that select students are going to be given interviews at the event at predetermined times. Unfortunately, this is not something that can be signed up for. This is something that you'll be contacted about. The partners make those decisions. So just keep on doing what you're doing. Make sure you're doing your research. Don't worry about if you hear from this or not. You still have plenty of ample opportunities to go and talk with the booths, talk with all the people there and make sure that you can follow up either with the companies through those informational interviews and through the people that you meet. And the final question here, the one that we're going to close on. Thank you so much for joining us today. This will be our last question. Is it still possible to sign up with Career Counselor? I missed the link for the sign up. The answer to that is yes. You are still able to sign up with the Career Counselors. There will be emails going out. I'm not quite sure on the timing of those, but there will be reminders to set up those times. And if you're in the Nano, and we're all in the program, so if you go to those Calendly links that you've been sent in the past, that's a great way to access the calendars to get on the Career Counselors calendars. So I hope that's helpful. And we will wrap on that question. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you for being patient with the technical difficulties at the beginning of the call. And thank you all for your amazing questions. You're going to do awesome. You're going to be just, oh, and if you do want to reach out, you can reach out at careers-support@udacity.com. And again, just a real big thank you. You're all going to do amazing at this career fair, at this hiring partner pop-up. You're going to crush it. You're going to do an amazing job. Just make sure that you do those key things. You do your research, you practice ahead of time, you know what you're curious about, and you ask a lot of questions. So thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the evening. Keep being audacious.